Students Who Design is a podcast and video series that bridges students and the design industry. By students, for students. Be sure to check out our website, studentswho.design.
This is Students Who Design.
Today we'll be talking to Cameron Pollack, who studies government at Cornell University and was a photojournalist intern at the Philadelphia Inquirer.
In this episode, we will cover teaching yourself photography, breaking into the photojournalism industry, and so much more. We really hope you enjoy this episode.
Students Who Design is sponsored in part by Facebook Design. For more resources and information on designing at Facebook, visit facebook.design and check out open roles at facebook.com/careers.
Hey Cameron.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
So let's start off by introducing what school you currently go to, your major, and where you previously worked.
Okay. My name's Cameron. I am a senior in the College of Arts and Sciences. I study American government, and where I've worked, I am currently the photo editor of the Cornell Daily Sun. I previously served as photo director of the Thread magazine, and I have interned at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I also work as a music photographer and a writer at WXPN, which is NPR's Philadelphia affiliate.
Wow. That's a long list. And so how did you get into photography?
So that started, I initially played music. I still play music a lot, but my parents would have me play music, especially over the summer. They would send me off to this camp in South Jersey, where I'd be playing music really like 9 or 10 hours a day, every day, for like an entire summer's worth. There came a point where I was like, I don't want to do this as much anymore. And so I went to Mom and I was like, hi Mom, I don't want to do this as much anymore. And she was like, okay, you can do photography. And I was like, okay. And so I would go back to this camp, and instead of playing music all the time, I would do photo all the time. The camp was an old farm. I was living in and working in converted chicken coops, and
This isn't like a sleepaway.
I mean it was, but it was different. It was unorthodox for sure, and I was basically doing black and white film, shooting, processing my own film, printing everything. I started doing this at 13.
Wow.
And then did that every summer until I turned 17. At which point, film got a little bit financially infeasible. And then I got my first digital camera then, and then kind of took it from there. So that was how I got into it. As far as music photography, I really like music and I really like photography. It kind of made sense to kind of put both of them together. And so I would like sneak into shows. I would apply to shoot shows under the credentials of blogs that didn't really exist. So I shot The Neighborhood that way, I shot the 1975 that way, I shot Fun that way, Panic at the Disco. And once I had kind of a concrete portfolio of bands that I had shot, I applied to work at XPN for my high school senior project, and thank God they decided that they liked me and they liked my work, and I've been photographing and writing for them ever since, and it's been really fun to just kind of support Philly music in that way, in a really unique way. And when I came to Cornell, it was I just wanted to do music because that's what I like to do. I applied to the Sun saying, hey, I want to shoot concerts for you guys. And they were like, you have to shoot other things too. Yeah. And so I learned how to shoot other things and then realized I really liked that too. It wound up being like a field of, not study because I didn't study it, but like a field that is as vivid as life should be. And I think that's really cool.
So let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So what do you see that most people don't see when it comes to photography, or just the action or the act of taking photos?
So I think it's specifically, at least for me, photojournalism, and that especially I noticed this most at the Enquirer, which we can talk about more. But with photojournalism, like, your hours are technically set. Like at the Enquirer, my hours were technically 10 to 6. But there were days where I had to get up at 4 in the morning to photograph a triathlon, or like that I was at Citizens Bank Park covering the Phillies until really late or something like that, traveling for assignments and things like that. Like, your day is never the same. Your day is really never, you're never repeating a day ever. And I think that's really cool, and like, it's very different from like your typical 9 to 5 where you get up, go to work, go home, go to bed, repeat.
Because your work is almost 24 hours.
Because you work constantly, and it's exhausting work, but it's never the same, and it's so vivid constantly, and you constantly get to work with people. You get to tell people stories. You get to talk about and depict the issues that are facing people, and I think that's a really important thing, and a thing that I'm really privileged to be able to do.
And so let's touch upon like your school involvements.
Mm-hmm.
So as a government major, in addition to all of the schoolwork that comes with that,
Mm-hmm.
how did you use your time effectively to continue to grow in this field?
So I think what I study definitely impacts what I enjoy shooting. I think the relationship between my studies and my work is actually a lot more symbiotic than it seems. Okay. From the get-go. I think the reason, so I got put on a story this past summer where I went up to Wellsboro and Renovo, Pennsylvania, rural towns, both of them, to cover a story about what would happen to their hospitals had the Senate healthcare bill from this past summer passed. And I think the reason they put me on that story is because they knew I had a lot of knowledge about both elections, American politics, and also about healthcare. And so it was all, like, my actual academic knowledge helped me kind of know what made a good photograph in that context. They also put me on a bunch of stories about the opioid crisis and about prison reentry and about and things like this. And having that knowledge actually made my life as a photographer in those moments a lot easier, because it helps you filter through the noise, kind of.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the professional aspect or your just general career and how you got there. Mm-hmm. So as a student who doesn't study photojournalism, Cornell's not really a fine arts school per se. So what was it like trying to break into this industry?
So I definitely, especially when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I actually didn't plan on like doing it professionally at first. There was one day, it was like my sophomore summer, I had just gotten back from studying abroad, and I was just like hanging out on my couch, and my 13-year-old sister at the time, comes in with this list of places that she wants me to work. And my 13-year-old sister comes in and hands me a list, and it's got the White House, it's got the New York Times, it's got like all of these places. And she's just like, you should apply to these places. And I was like, all right, fine. And so I did. I tried to like pull together all the resources that I could find on like what made a good like cover letter in journalism, like what kind of portfolio people like to see, and then started applying. Logically, I got a zillion rejections. I think I got rejected around 20-something times between December and mid-March. And the last reply I got was from the Enquirer, being like, "Hey, we like your stuff. We'd like you to come down and talk to us."
What do you think they saw that many other of these places didn't?
I think the director of photo, Michael Brincanti, when I talked to him in my interview, they hired me right after the interview. But he was just like, I normally don't pay much mind to the people who submit like a lot of concerts and things like that, but you do these things really creatively, and I think what did it more than anything else, so I covered a music festival in Philly for WXPN that fall of 2016, and there were a bunch of Enquirer photographers there shooting alongside me. And a photo I had in my portfolio of 2 Chainz, faking taking a picture, looking at us like doing this. One of the Enquirer photographers also ran with and was like the lead-off image on an article. And so I think what did it was the fact that my image and his image were of similar caliber or whatever. And I think that's what he found compelling. I think also my like style of concert photography is pretty different from other people. I typically find like normal like mic to face shots to be boring. And so you can kind of find other creative things to do. And I love like really big festivals like that have crazy like backgrounds going on, because you can do really creative things and like use negative space in a really kind of interesting way that normally isn't how it's used. So I think that's what Michael saw in that moment, and I'm really thankful that he was willing to take a chance.
So let's say you're a student who is in a similar position but wants to get into this field. What are the steps that he or she have to take to get into this?
So I would definitely recommend, as someone, if you're someone like me who like doesn't study it formally, to kind of diversify your skill set in a way that will make you not just a good photographer, but someone who's prepared to tackle journalism as a whole. So learning how to code, learning how to write really well, flying drones, like it's in a lot of job description is knowing how to do that.
Why do photographers have to code?
It's mostly for web presentation, and things like that. Like knowing how to present your work really effectively online is becoming more and more of an important facet of journalism. Like the best, like most popular outlets, like think Vox, think like Business Insider, things like that. The things that are growing really, really fast. All have great data visualization. 538, New York Times, The Upshot. They all have really good visuals. They know how to present their things in really compelling ways, and that's an important thing for photographers to know how to do. Even if it's just like designing, if it's just like designing a website to like present like a photo story, it's a really important thing to know how to do. So.
And where do you think looking back on like your almost 10 years of
something like that.
Where do you think were kind of the defining moments to help you get to where you are today, and then will continue to help you in the future?
So I don't know if there was any one defining moment. I mean, it's been almost a decade, and so it's like or
multiple moments.
It's truly for me. It was very much a trial and error process. Being like, I think the like moments like I can't pick out a particular moment because I think it's just like me working, realizing I don't like what I'm doing, consciously looking at what I'm doing and saying, hey, what don't I like about this? What do I like about what other people are doing? And then adjusting how I shoot, how I compose, how I edit, and then still going.
And how many images is that in total?
600,000?
That's a lot.
Something like that. Something like that.
From those 600,000, what was kind of your criteria when composing your portfolio? Because I'm sure that might be something.
And so I think the most important thing to me personally when picking images for a portfolio is the moment it represents. Things can be composed simply, but if what's actually in the picture is a really like interesting or unique moment, I think that's really important too. Like you could take the best composed photo in the world, but if it's of something boring or inconsequential, it's an inconsequential picture. But moments that illustrate either like happiness or like tension between people, or between like a person and like a political phenomenon are all really important. And so the first picture in my portfolio is a photo of Allen Iverson of the Sixers. He's walking in.
The Big Three.
Yeah, he's on his Big Three tour, and he's walking into the bowl. Everyone's screaming. I have 7-year-olds like clamoring over me, trying to give him a high five or whatever. And but he has the most downtrodden look on his face because he knows he's not going to play that night. And not play in front of like the crowd that like made him famous, kind of. And so like that, and I think that's just a really important moment to illustrate, and then the next one is Joe Biden holding up the ice cream cone, because of course it's like, because everyone who has ever like followed him during his vice presidency knows of his like ridiculous obsession with ice cream, and so just seeing the joy on his face, I think is a really important thing to depict, and so those moments are what I try to put forward when I pick, and those moments are few and far between, but when they're there, you know they're there.
And so when you were on the job at the Enquirer, are there any things that you had to kind of pick up, or things that you would have to focus on more because you didn't have the photojournalism background, or you weren't studying that?
So I think the lesson I learned fastest is that you need to be very choosy with what you hand over to your editors. That's really important, and then also every shot should at the very least be from a different vantage point, or they should all do something different. There's no need to send 3 photos of someone from the same position with like a slightly different facial expression. So you need to be very choosy, and you need to be very deliberate with what you submit. Beyond that, I think they're pretty flexible with like your style, I guess, like, because I think as long as you submit variable kinds of photos, like one like more telephoto, one wider, and things like that, then they're pretty open to however you like to shoot things.
And how did you, whenever you got feedback on your photos just over the years, what did you do? So you got the feedback, you got constructive criticism. How would you make sure that you took that into account and apply that to your photography?
So what I did often, I don't do it as much anymore, but it was so whoever would give me feedback, I'd pick my favorite photos of theirs, and then I'd print out photos of mine. I'd kind of mark them up, be like, what do I like here? Okay. Let's actually circle it, write it down, and then what's not as strong here. So consciously writing out what's good or what's not about an image or about a series of images can really help you pick things to focus on. Like, is there a good face here? What is your eye drawn to, or like other things like that. Those are all really important things to actually pick out and consider.
So these are a series of questions that we ask every single guest on the show.
Okay.
And so the first question is, having the experience that you do, what are some things that the photography industry doesn't quite understand about the student photography community?
So I think I can't really speak for a lot of the student photography community because I'm not a photography student. That said, I think there is something in the photojournalism industry that is biased towards students who study photojournalism, yes. And that's even evident in students who study photojournalism who kind of look at what I do now. Like I had a co-intern at the Enquirer. Her name was Margot. She's a genius in her own right, but she studies photojournalism, and we got dinner together after our internships were over. And she was just like, I had this conception, like I tell people who don't study photo at Temple to apply to the Enquirer because I think it's like a thing for people who study, and then you came along and to kind of destroy that conception. And so what I would ask of like the industry as a whole is to let people's portfolios and let people's skills speak louder than what they study. In particular, because I think what I study is it's a big part of me, but at the same time, there's a lot more to me in how I work and in what I've learned. And so I think respecting people who don't come from that one kind of track, I think is really important. And I think you'll get a lot of really talented people if you look outside that one track.
So as a photography leader on campus, I'm sure there's a lot of students that come up to you asking for advice, critique, and just general things. What do you usually tell them?
So I'm of course willing to critique anyone's photos who who asks. I've done that for you.
Yeah.
I've done that for Omar and other people. But I think as far as like advice, I think it's really important to find photographers who you like, who are really compelling for you, and then figure out what you actually like about them, articulate what you actually like about them, and there's nothing that says that you can't emulate what they do, so go ahead and emulate it. So that's what I would do. That's what I did. I found photographers who I really, really enjoyed. My favorite photographer, who probably influenced my work more than any other person, is Damon Winter from the New York Times. He's covered Obama's 2008, 2012 campaigns, and spent a lot of time with Trump this past year. And he is. If I don't know if you'll see it if you look at our work put together, but the way he composes things, the way he uses negative space, have all really impacted how I shoot, and the way he uses human faces of seemingly minor people, and like especially a campaign story. The way he uses them speaks volumes, I think, about the campaign as a whole.
You point students towards other photographers.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with finding people you like and then using their techniques to help improve your own work. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
So there's a lot of noise in the photography industry,
Yes.
like around gear, around like 6 tips to do this on Reddit,
Yeah.
on Petapixel, all these things. What do you do to filter out what is noise and then what's actually content relevant
So
to you?
I think I do not think, other than captioning photos, photographers should be as much in the business of words. I think it's really important for a photographer to develop their own like personal philosophy, independent of other people. I think technique is something that we can all share and talk about, but I think philosophy and like personal attitudes in photography can be kind of minimized, I think.
Do you lean towards more like philosophical things, or
I
try to avoid any listicles? Or
I am adverse to listicles, absolutely. I think having a strong base, knowing how light works, knowing how exposure works is really important. Knowing how composition works is really important. Kind of knowing how to draw someone's eye to a particular part of a frame, I think that's really important. And then beyond that, I think the most important thing is to just kind of think about how to capture like someone's humanity in a picture. I think that is the most important thing we can do. And if you're focusing on that, you will have good pictures. Some better than others, obviously, because some moments are better photographed than others. But that is a really good foundation, and knowing how light works, knowing how composition works, and then knowing how people work.
So reading more books than online things.
I think so.
Is the way to go.
I really do think so.
So do you have any mentors that you follow, or people that you follow to stay inspired, or things that act as pseudo mentors?
So I think I've never had a teacher. Like I had someone teaching me exposure and things like that when I was doing film. But besides that, I've never really had a teacher. And so I've looked a lot to books, and I've looked a lot to Instagram to follow people whose work I really, really admire, and then also just reading the news. Like reading the news, and if you see a really good picture, follow that person on whatever social media they have. Like look at their website and things like that, and that has definitely guided how I shoot a lot. Like some of my favorite sports photographers, I would never have found had it not been for Instagram, and and I find that really cool. So like Al Bello and Adam Preddy, they both work for Getty Images, but they, as far as composition goes, are absolute geniuses, both of them. And I would never have found their work had it not been for like social media and my friends like upping their work and like showing them to me. But like if you have like friends in the photo community and you really like someone's work and you think they'd like them too, just like be like, hey, this is cool.
Yeah.
Look at this. So and I try to do that with my staff a lot too. I'm trying to build that culture a little bit before I leave.
And so let's say a listener came out to you asking, I want to get into photography. What should I do? What's the first thing you would tell them?
Pick up this.
For our podcast listeners, Cameron is holding up his cell phone.
Okay.
And take cool things with this because like the iPhone is it is the most used camera by far in the world. It is and it's a really good camera if you know how to use it. So teaching yourself composition, teaching yourself lighting just with this will give you a really good foundation for everything else. Because if you don't have to use your gear as a crutch, like you're kind of there at least technically. So and also use this, learn exposure, and just find a lot of people whose work you like.
And our last question is, what's next?
Well, in the immediate term, I have to go photograph ultimate frisbee right now. In the long term, I either if I get a staff job out of college, I will work as a staff photographer wherever hires me. If not, I will freelance. I will work elsewhere, doing something. Apply to grad school, get my writing and data chops up even more, and then try again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Students Who Design is written and produced by Sahil Koja and Omar Abdul Rahim. Visit our website, studentswho.design, for more information.